What's up, guys? Welcome to Daily Dose of Reddit. This is your host, Zach, and today's subreddit is r/ProRevenge. Alright, this story's called, I Did to My Neighbor What They Did to Others. To start, I bought a house with the intention of doing a flip. When I moved in, the self-appointed block captain let me know who they were the first day. Sadly, they were my next-door neighbors. I tried to be friendly, but listening to them, I realized how horrible they were and tried to keep still to be civil. My significant other kept saying, just wait for it to be our turn. They bragged about, through their contacts with the city, forcing people to make improvements on their houses, getting undesirable renters out of the houses, and just harassing people in general. As I worked on flipping my house, the wife became a worse thorn in my side. To start, she demanded I put up a fence so people would quit cutting through my yard and scaring her. Then, her and her husband demanded I take care of the weeds in the yard or they will do it and bill me. After that, a storm caused a tree to scrape their shingles and they asked for $1,200 to replace them. The tree was there before I moved in, and by co-ed, they are responsible to cut back the branches to the property line. When I wouldn't pay, they had a relative jump my fence and cut the trees down. Needless to say, I began to ignore them, so she became a constant gnat and moved on to other targets. Then one day, as I was tearing down my deck for a patio, I realized she put a feral cat colony on a section of my property. I had wondered why all the stray cats were around, and I finally found out. I reached out to the city and demanded it to be removed, but they said she followed the law on getting it in place. As I tried to get it shut down, she began unhinged behavior, from standing in her window staring at me, yelling out the window at me, to hitting the fence with items to scare my dog. Here, my revenge started. I started by filing an HRO, or harassment restraining order, against the wife and had it granted ex parte with the evidence I provided. Of course, she contested it, as it was defamatory to her character. Before the hearing, the husband tried to physically intimidate me, so I filed one against him, and it was also granted ex parte. In the hearing, it came up that there was an HRO against the husband as well. They dodged being served until I had it published as a means of service. I started to make complaints about them in their house. Also, I made police calls when necessary. As I did this, the other neighbors began to realize they could do to them what they had done to them and others. For example, as I was having my front door replaced, needing a building work permit, as she ranted at the inspector, he looked at my window and saw I had mine displayed. Their back porch became hoarded, so I made another call to a city inspector and they had to clear it out. Then they had a broken window on the porch door, so I called an inspector and they had to replace the door. Next, the paint on their house was peeling, so I called an inspector and they had to repaint. The inspector also found the wood underneath was rotted along with their front porch sloping in, so they needed to fix the front porch, sections of wood, and repaint. Through all of this, they had up cameras to prove they were not doing the things I said, i.e. hitting the fence. They also pointed a camera at my backyard. As it was legal to point a camera into my yard, and a part of my HRO was her intrusive watching behaviors, I gave the camera the middle finger on my way to and from my garage. When she complained, with the city tiring of her, their response was she was admitting to intrusively watching me. The fight over the cat colony came to an end when I realized one of the cats had a serious disease, and I began to capture them and turn them into animal control. Don't worry, animal control was part of the feral cat program, so they would not be put down. But the neighbor would have to pay a fine to get each cat out or have the colony closed. Finally, I caught the sick one, and it had rabies. Part of the program was for her to capture each new cat and have it vaccinated, something she admitted to willingly not doing on her GoFundMe for the colony. I soon had the GoFundMe shut down when I provided the evidence that she was not using the funds as she stated they were going to be used. The city now had to act to close the colony. The person at the animal control who wouldn't respond to my complaints was fired. The neighbors called in a city mediator, who we met with, presented all the evidence, and said we would not meet with them, and provided extremely racist tweets they made about neighbors. The city cut ties with them as community leaders. With their power to bully gone and having spent what I can only imagine in fines and repairs like they did to numerous other neighbors. After 14 years, they sold their house and moved out, way out to the suburbs where they only have one neighbor about 50 yards away. They knew I was wrapping up my flip and would be out in less than a year. Without being able to bully their neighbors, with people having their back, they seemed to have no further reason to stay. Needless to say, I did several more things to wear them down. Finally, when I listed my house, it was sold while theirs was still on the market. As a final FU to them, I reported to the county they had both the new and old house listed as their homestead, meaning they were paying less in property taxes, so they got hit with more fines on my way out. Damn! That's some... Okay, first of all, how everyone was operating through the city officials and oh my god, all of that just really gross to me. Like, just, I don't know, it just makes me have this really gross feeling because I don't know. Like, I would not like to be in that situation. However, I'm not diminishing your accomplishment. If anything, I'm applauding you even more because I would not have been able to deal with any of that freaking legal crap. Oh my god, you have to have a building permit or whatever to replace your front door on a house you freaking own? What? This story's called Parents Use Trees to Block Occupancy Permits. Obligatory on mobile, so my parents bought their house in the early 90s in a very expensive city. They bought the garbage house on the block, and 30 years later, it's quintupled in price. This is relevant. My parents live in a very upscale suburb of said expensive city. Think San Francisco, New York. The city is run by old ladies who don't allow anything. Drive-thrus are not permitted in the suburb for aesthetic reasons. There are no streetlights allowed except for on the main street to keep the city rustic. Apartments are not ever permitted. You get what I'm throwing at you. This place is no joke. Anyway, my parents live on a granite hill with a gorgeous view of the valley. The hill is very windy. Imagine my parents have a long rectangular house, mid-century to help you imagine, and the hill and street wrap around one end of the rectangle going uphill. The curve is basically a U. There is another shallower curve below us, so it's basically an upside down S. Large trucks cannot get up their street. They can't make it past the first turn, much less turn at my folks' house. Mid-sized trucks cannot make it past the second turn at my parents' house without cutting onto my parents' property. Unfortunately, developers like to test that theory. Okay, so to the story. The sweet elderly neighbor above my parents' house passed away a few years back. She had a beautiful, well-maintained mid-century, albeit all original, with a gorgeous view. Not much property, but the view is amazing. Of course, developers snap it up, not realizing how much of a bimbo it is to get permits in this stuck-up suburb. That's hurdle number one. Instead of modernizing this gorgeous mid-century, the developers, of course, need to rip it down to the studs and completely rebuild it to a dated 2000s-looking box, complete with an in-ground soaking pool, basically a cold jacuzzi. I don't get it. Backyard is way too small for a pool. You get where this is going. So developers piss off the neighbors below because they tried to bring the extra big trucks and completely destroyed their brick mailbox. Developers switched to medium-large trucks and started driving over my parents' property. My parents also have a brick mailbox that is part of the fencing. They hit the mailbox so hard it moved the mailbox and the fence. Remember how my parents live on a hill? Yeah, that fence is part of the retaining wall. They were also continually doing damage to the edge of my parents' property by driving over it. Important part. The trucks were so big, they were hitting one of my parents' trees on the turn to get to the development house. To keep this short and sweet, my parents tried politely to speak with the developers, and they got the usual cold shoulder and middle finger. Well, fortunately for my parents, we have a nosy Nancy next door who loves to be the neighborhood watchdog. We've known her for 30 years. She's polite friends with my parents at this point. Anyway, she's big into construction. Her garden is amazing. She ran into my mom and told her what's happening. She goes, "Oh, just report it to the city." And the plan was hatched. All of the neighbors had a meeting at my parents' house. They'd done damage to, I think, 4 different neighbors at this point, and they decided they'd start fighting the permits together. My parents fought the permit, citing some sort of damage to their trees, trees, along with the fence and mailbox. Oh boy, did the city not like hearing about the trees. And they definitely perked up when they saw 4 neighbors flipping out on a street that only had 16 houses. At this point, the new house is almost complete, and they're filing for their occupancy permits. Well, the city decides that they can't have their occupancy permits until an arborist goes and checks on my parents' trees. Oh man, that was almost a completely different sentence. So guess what? They done some significant damage to the trees. The city decides to block the permits until the developers have paid for some kind of crap with the trees. Sorry, I can't remember the details. I'll have to ask my dad. Also, they have to repair all the mailboxes and fences they damaged. Further, we discover the large equipment going up and down the hill was to dig the cold jacuzzi, which wasn't permitted. Long story short, it took them 1.5 years to finally get the occupancy permit. The house then sat on the market for another 2 years. Overpriced and ugly, and a party house built in a wealthy suburb on a street with no parking? My parents think they took a huge loss on that development based just on property taxes alone. Karma. OP, your parents are baller. And that house sounds pretty cool, but I don't know if I visualized it correctly. So based on your description with the roads and the hill and the rectangular house, so basically we're looking at SpongeBob's house, which is a pineapple under the sea. And as you know, pineapples are nature's rectangles. And in my mind, the sea floor, even if it is flat or not, it's always a hill because it's underwater, and it makes up for the fact that it's not a mound of dirt that sits at a higher elevation. Oh my god, I try incredibly hard to look as stupid as possible, and it's so fun. This story's called Try to Blackmail Me? I'll Ruin Your Life! Throwaway, because this could be a real problem for me career-wise if the phone sex company I work for found out. Oh. Also, obligatory I'm on mobile apology for formatting. This happened a few years ago. I was maybe 26 at the time. I am a trans man, but present feminine and work as a professional dominatrix as a woman. I do a lot of work through a popular phone sex website. I had a client contact me on there and get my Skype ID. Sometimes clients want to cam chat there. It's not technically allowed by the site TOS, but they turn a blind eye because dollar bills, yo! And he messaged me to negotiate a session. He complained about my rates, demanded I do stuff I'm not comfortable with. I don't get fully nude on cam calls. I don't talk about having clients touch me sexually. I don't do sessions as a sub. And eventually threatened me with bad reviews and to report me to the site, and said I didn't want to show him my junk because I was a very nasty word for a trans woman. Ironic, I know. He called me every name in the book, and I blocked him and thought nothing of it. I'd been with that site 5 years and made them hundreds of thousands over the course of them, so I wasn't worried. Damn, bro! However, a little later, he pops up again with a new account and screen name a few days later, threatening violence and accusing me of stealing from him. I screen cap this and send it to the site. They say there's nothing they can do about him creating multiple accounts beside ban them as they occur. I block him again and think maybe he'll give up. Nope! A few days later, there's a new account that talks in the same tone, demands the same crap, etc. So this time, with all the usernames he'd used, I take to Google, and what do I find? But other PSOs who dealt with him complaining about them. What does PSO stand for? Professional Sex Operator, right? I messaged some of them about what's happening, and one gets back to me super fast. She says he's been harassing her for years, telling her he hoped she'd have a miscarriage when she was pregnant, threatening her boyfriend. At this point, I'm furious, not only on my behalf, but on behalf of everyone else he's pulled this crap with. She tried to go to the cops, no help there, of course, but this idiot had given her a ton of personal info, from his full name to his address. Oh my god. I'm a pretty good internet detective thanks to my line of work, so I start Googling and putting together information. I find everything. everything. And I mean everything. From his mom's name, the date of his dad's death, to his girlfriend's name, to the crappy band he played in high school, where he works, and who his landlord is. I don't even know my own name. I call everyone, politely informing them of what this little crap is up to. His mom, his girlfriend, his everybody. I call his girlfriend at work just to make sure she gets it. He contacts me on Kick, demanding a response, threatening to sue me for harassment. I laugh my ass off and explain how that doesn't work, and that if he contacts me again, I'll sue him for harassment and show him the statutes on it where we live. You have to tell the person to stop contacting you before it can be harassment. I told him multiple times to stop bothering me, but he'd only ever demanded that I do talk to him. After that, I did stop contacting him, but I gave all the information I dug up so the other professional sex operators, phone sex operators, oh, duh, I'm so dumb, other phone sex operators to do with as they liked. Last I checked, he was living with his brother in a truly crappy looking apartment and tweeting about how no one will hire him because people are mean, and about how much he hates women. Edit to clarify, before this, he seemed to have a pretty nice life. Pretty girlfriend working in real estate, a job in tech, and was renting a pretty nice big house in a nice town. I googled him just now, and there are multiple places where if you Google his name, it shows you just what kind of person he is. Damn, bro. That dude had balls freaking harassing his dominatrix. Like, I thought you're supposed to be scared of a dominatrix. What a freaking dummy head. Oh, but he was wanting OP to be submissive and crap. Man, why are people so weird? Like, oh my gosh. Like, that guy, I don't get it, man. And also, poor girlfriend. Like, I'm sure she was up for a rude awakening when she got that call. Man. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode.